Brian Chesky didn't start with ambition. He started with fear. Fear of being average, fear of being invisible, fear of going back to nothing. He grew up without safety nets, no wealthy parents, no powerful friends, no shortcuts disguised as connections, just pressure. When Brian moved to San Francisco, the dream didn't arrive with him. The rent did. Bills stacked faster than opportunities. Savings disappeared quietly. Pride went first. There were nights he slept on the floor. Not metaphorically, literally. No bed, no couch, no backup plan. This wasn't the romantic struggle people like to talk about. This was embarrassment. The kind you don't post online, the kind you don't tell your parents, the kind that makes you avoid friends. Brian didn't feel like a founder. He felt like a failure who hadn't officially failed yet. When the money ran out, reality showed its teeth. San Francisco didn't care about potential. Landlords didn't accept vision as payment. You either paid or you disappeared. That's when the first uncomfortable truth hit him. Being poor isn't just about money. It's about being ignored. Ideas from poor people sound risky. Ideas from connected people sound innovative. Same idea, different bank account. Brian had no network, no investor dinners, no warm introductions, no one saying, "I'll vouch for him." Just silence. So he did what poor people have always done. He improvised. An air mattress, a living room, a conference in town. Not a startup, not a vision, just survival. They didn't call it Airbnb yet. It wasn't a platform, it wasn't a marketplace. It was, we need rent money. That matters. Because this company wasn't born from confidence. It was born from shame mixed with urgency. Brian wasn't chasing disruption, he was chasing next month. And here's the part people skip. He felt stupid selling it. Letting strangers sleep in your home, charging money for floor space, it sounded desperate, because it was. But desperation has a strange advantage. You stop caring how it looks. You start caring if it works. While others waited to look impressive, Brian focused on being alive next month. This is the real starting line. Not genius, not privilege, not confidence, just refusal to quit quietly. And Brian made a decision that would define everything. He would never pretend he wasn't poor. He would use it. Brian learned something brutal fast. Being poor forces clarity. You don't debate ideas, you test them. The air mattress worked, not perfectly, not impressively, but someone paid, and that changed everything. Payment is truth, not likes, not compliments, not interesting idea. Money means someone felt the pain enough to act. Still, the world didn't suddenly respect him. Investors laughed, more than once. Who would let strangers sleep in their house? This will never scale. This is a lifestyle business. Translation, you don't look like us, you don't sound like us, you don't belong here. Brian heard no so often it stopped hurting. Rejection became background noise, like traffic. But poverty teaches another lesson. When doors don't open, you build side entrances. They needed money, not someday, now. So they sold cereal, Obama O's, Captain McCain's, political parody, ridiculous packaging, zero dignity. But it worked, enough to survive, enough to keep going. This is important. Airbnb didn't survive because it was elegant. It survived because its founders were not too proud. Brian didn't ask, does this damage my image? He asked, does this buy us time? Time is oxygen for poor founders. Without it, ideas suffocate. While others optimized pitch decks, Brian optimized rent. Still, doubt crept in at night, quietly. What if everyone is right? What if this is stupid? What if this ends the same way? But quitting had a cost too, going back to nothing, going back to explaining why it didn't work. So he stayed, not because he believed, because leaving hurt more. And then something shifted, not success, understanding. People didn't want cheap hotels. They wanted belonging. They wanted to feel local, human, seen. Airbnb wasn't about rooms, it was about dignity, for guests, for hosts, for the founders themselves. Brian realized, poor people understand trust differently. When you have nothing, trust isn't a buzzword, it's survival. That insight didn't come from books, it came from being broke. And slowly, painfully, the same idea everyone mocked started making sense. Not to everyone, but to enough. Growth didn't arrive as a celebration, it arrived as pressure. More users meant more problems. More hosts meant more trust issues. More guests meant more complaints. One bad stay could kill everything. One story could destroy the brand. Brian understood something early. If Airbnb felt unsafe once, it would be unsafe forever. So he obsessed. He read support tickets himself. He answered emails at night. He rewrote copy again and again. Not to sound smart, to sound human. This wasn't founder vanity. This was fear. Fear of losing the only thing they had. Trust is fragile, and poor people know this best. Investors still doubted. They asked for numbers. Brian talked about feelings. They asked about scale. Brian talked about hosts crying when their first guest arrived. It sounded weak. It was actually the product. Airbnb wasn't growing because of marketing. It grew because strangers trusted strangers just enough. Then the crisis hit. A host's home was trashed. The story went public. Everyone waited. This was the moment. Disappear, deflect, blame the user. Brian chose something rare: responsibility. He apologized publicly. He paid the damages. He created host guarantees. It cost money, money they barely had, but it bought something priceless: legitimacy. From that moment, Airbnb changed categories. Not weird startup, but serious company. Brian learned the final lesson of poverty. When you've been ashamed of having nothing, you stop being afraid of losing things. So he bet the company on doing the right thing. It worked. Airbnb didn't win because it was clever. It won because it respected people no one else respected. Guests who couldn't afford hotels, hosts who needed extra income, founders who refused to pretend they were rich. Poverty wasn't the weakness. Hiding it was. Brian never tried to erase where he came from, and that became Airbnb's moat. Not technology, not funding, understanding. Success didn't calm Brian down. It made him more paranoid. Money came in. Users exploded. The press flipped. But inside the company, something broke. Airbnb was no longer three broke guys. It was hundreds of employees who had never slept on the floor. They wanted process. They wanted hierarchy. They wanted safety. Brian felt the distance growing. The thing that made Airbnb work was slowly being optimized out. So he did something dangerous. He slowed down. While competitors chased growth charts, Brian chased alignment. He rewrote the mission. He rewrote the culture. He rewrote how decisions were made. Not with spreadsheets, with stories. He told employees about cereal boxes, about maxed out cards, about pitching investors who laughed. Not to sound heroic, to remind them. Airbnb wasn't built by confidence. It was built by desperation and empathy. Then came the hardest test: COVID. Travel died overnight. Bookings collapsed. Revenue vanished. People said, "This is it. Game over. Hospitality is dead." Brian stared at the numbers. Then he did the most painful thing of his life. He laid people off, but he didn't hide. He wrote a public letter. Long, honest, human. He explained why. He apologized. He took responsibility. He gave severance. He helped them find jobs. It hurt, but it preserved something rare: trust. And trust survived the pandemic. When travel returned, Airbnb returned stronger. Because the world remembered, this company treats people like humans. Brian had no network, so he built one. He had no money, so he built value. He had no safety net, so he became careful with others. That's the real lesson. Poverty sharpens perception. It teaches you what matters because you can't afford mistakes. Airbnb wasn't built despite being poor. It was built because of it. And Brian Chesky never forgot what it felt like to sleep on the floor while pitching a dream.